IB Nation Sports Talk. We're up and rolling. He's Ryan Roberts. I'm Sean Stiers. We are tell you what, we're a day away from Valentine's Day. It's very exciting. Sweeping the nation. Who knew that there was a holiday where you could go out and buy cards and candy and go out to dinner and spark the economy. I guess.
or Sean, or you can just be a great husband and just treat every day like Valentine's Day because you're
I
a
know,
sweet
right?
person, Yeah.
I guess that's very true. The expectations are high tonight. DK jumping in saying tonight's show better be twice as good to make up for the fact that there is no show tomorrow. DK, we're giving you the opportunity to go out and be a sweetheart to that special someone in your life.
We strive to be the best version of ourselves every day, DK, and so we're giving you the time tomorrow to be the best husband that you are, or why? I don't know your status, but if you are, we're giving you the opportunity.
That's right. Do you have any big Valentine's plans tomorrow, Ryan?
Nah, man, I got 2 kids under 3, so the Valentine's Day plans is
This is why you need Valentine's plans.
Well, Sean, I do have some flowers being delivered to my wife's work, so that'll be a good start to the day. Hopefully she doesn't. I know she doesn't listen to the podcast, so I can air this out. But yeah, so we got flowers getting delivered, man. I'm probably going to pick up some steaks from the grocery store and make a nice romantic dinner at home because it's gonna be a little tough getting the because we're actually going out Thursday nights with some friends. Okay. So babysitters back-to-back nights was not going to be in the cards, unfortunately.
Yeah. Seeing like we've done in the past because of work and stuff like that, we've done like Valentine's thing on the weekend or whatever. It's a little different this year since Valentine's is right in the middle of the week on Wednesday, and it was also Super Bowl weekend, and I was in Tallahassee on Saturday for basketball. So it's, like it kind of messed everything up.
You've been busy, man. You've been busy. You've been very busy.
We actually have a 3:00 reservation tomorrow because, it's like, oh, we're going to do 3:00 dinner. Because I was a little late to the party knowing that we were taking tomorrow off. So, so it was
either 3:00 or 9:00. There was no in between on the reservations. Yeah,
exactly. And we actually were going to just go sit at the bar, which we don't mind doing, and we'll do a lot. But they said this particular place said nope, no bar on Valentine's Day, which I find
crazy,
very odd. Like, what, you're literally just going to rope off the bar and not let anyone sit there because it's Valentine's Day? That doesn't seem to make a whole lot of sense.
Yeah, that's a little weird, man. They, Sean, they should just give this entire week off to everyone because we had Super Bowl rolling into the Monday, and then we got Valentine's Day. Man, it should just been a whole week off of work. And
that's not
it's not a shot at IB. That's a shot at this country, right? Give everybody
tomorrow. And I've got someone brought it up again today. Tomorrow is Ash Wednesday. I don't know what that has to do with anything. It's not like, do people take Ash Wednesday off? I've never known. It's like usually people just show up with the ashes on their forehead on, at work on Ash Wednesday. Yes. So Brent, Jesse will be here in just a little bit. He'll be rolling in for rapid fire in a little bit. So you will have your opportunity, you two, to butt heads, go head to head, Brent's very feisty for a team who, lost this weekend. He really wants to mix it up with Jesse. I think he wants to have the Brock Purdy discussion.
Oh, he's a San Francisco 49ers.
He's a 49ers fan.
Got it. Oh, yep. Okay. All right.
I know.
It was a good game, man. It was a good game, at least. I mean, I know it doesn't make it any better for you as a fan, but I mean, it was a really good football game, honestly. So
it was. I mean, it entertained the rest of us. It's like, I've kind of said this about the Cowboys on Thanksgiving. Like, why should I have to sit there and wrench my gut every Thanksgiving day, hoping that they're going to win or at least not be completely embarrassing for the sake of everyone else's entertainment? And that's kind of how the Super Bowl is. If your team's not, like, if your team is in it, obviously it's great if they win, but if not, you're entertaining America is what you're doing. And I thought it, just like you, like, most of regulation wasn't necessarily the most exciting, but the defenses played great, and you get a Super Bowl that goes to overtime, and goes right down to the final play the way it
What?
did. That's
Well,
a great Super Bowl. It's all you can ask for.
well, you know what's the worst sometimes, Sean, is like I didn't even mind that it was a defensive battle back and forth throughout most of the game because it was legitimately just really good defense, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, like I remember I'm a Rams fan, so unfortunately the Rams New England Super Bowl a few years ago where it was like 9-3 or what the heck
Ugh.
that game was, it was
Yeah, that was really
disgusting.
ugly.
But that was more just bad offenses than it was really good defenses. Like
Uh-huh.
this game, it was like San Francisco's defense was playing their butts off. Kansas City's defense had been playing great all year. They were number 2 ranked defense in all of the NFL this year. I mean, like it was more really good defense than bad offense, I thought. And then the offenses kicked it into overdrive in the fourth quarter and then in overtime, obviously. So it was good.
Right.
It was good. 13-3. I'm sorry. My apologies, DK. My apologies. I
I don't
try
know.
to throw that one out of the memory bank, man. Like that was the worst Super Bowl I've ever watched in my entire life, especially as a fan. That was
I
terrible.
bet. Yeah, for sure. Well, let's get to the meat and potatoes of this show. We teased this a little bit yesterday. Vince and I talked about Chris O'Leary leaving, going to join Jim Harbaugh's staff with the Los Angeles Chargers, and I promised that with you coming on tonight, we would spin it toward the recruiting side of things. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to get a little bit more into the recruiting impact of Chris O'Leary leaving. So let's start off. How important 2025 class is obviously next. How important is safety recruiting in this 25 class, do you think?
I mean, it was arguably the most important position comparative to what it had been previously because the 2023 and 2024 classes. I've talked about this a ton on IB Nation on Irish Breakdown podcast, Sean. But 2023, you ended up getting 2 good safeties in Adon Schuler and Ben Minnick. But everybody knows the Peyton Bowen fiasco. Everybody knows Brandon Hillman obviously not being able to get into school, and then he ends up in Michigan. And then 2024 was like, you got a really good player in Bronte Johnson out of the state of Indiana, but otherwise it was like your process was so bad. Like you just missed on so many different players. And it was just like, you knew Chris O'Leary was a good coach, a really good coach potentially, but
Mm-hmm.
was he going to be a good recruiter? I mean, it was just a headache to understand that question. Right. And then 2025, you fast forward and you're like, this one is kind of a, don't call it make or break, but it was a very, very important one for Coach O'Leary to show that he has that recruiting upside and that recruiting ability to go along with being a good coach. And he got off to a fantastic start, man. I mean,
Yeah.
you're sitting here with Ivan Taylor and Ethan Long, and then still in a good position with JaDon Blair. Like, you're in a great spot in 2025 safety recruiting. And then, Sean, as soon as he starts answering those questions as far as how high of an impactful recruiter he could be, he's gone. And then you're like, wow, you meant from a year before this to being like, dang, I don't know if anybody ever wants to come play safety for this team. Like it's just really strange. There's a weird vibe to dudes want to come play safety for Chris O'Leary, but now we need to worry about, are they going to stay now that Chris O'Leary is gone to the NFL? Like it is just
Right.
such a strange offseason compared to last year.
Right. And there are 2 commitments and another one, you just mentioned all 3 names, 2 commitments that they have, another one they're working on. So let's kind of work through those guys a little bit. And we got our smart guys, telling you, like Anthony, if you join the boards, this information would be available, but not everyone is on the boards. Some people just like the podcast, they show up for the show. We appreciate everyone showing up for the show, but we've got to let everyone know that's why we're doing this.
Well, and Sean, I mean, he is correct in that boards.irishbreakdown.com, you would have had all this information yesterday, but that is why you sign up for the message board, to be ahead of the curve by a day and a half. But we have to enlighten the people on all the latest endeavors here on the podcast, obviously.
That's right. That's right. So how about Ethan Long, Connecticut guy? He's been committed to Notre Dame. Is the commitment, do you feel like it's still strong right now with O'Leary leaving?
It's an interesting one because he's actually the newest member of the 2025 class at safety. He committed early in January, right? So he's kind of the new guy of the commits comparative to him and Ivan Taylor. But Sean, honestly, before I even talked to Ethan, in my mind, I was just like, Ethan's not going anywhere, man. He's not, and he's out of Greenwich, Connecticut, for people that don't follow recruiting too well. He goes to Brunswick School out there. but he was a player that he did the process how you typically see processes go, as far as he went to visit everywhere. He let the process play out. He didn't rush the decision. And I think he made the decision based upon every part of the pitch, which was a great thing, right? The 4 for 40 was important to him. The coaching relationships he had was very important to him. The campus life was very important to him. All those factored in for Ethan Long. So all of that to say is, I didn't think it was going to be an issue. And then coming out of the conversation with Ethan, it's not an issue, man. I mean, like, he reaffirmed the commitment. I put out a story yesterday where, I mean, without even asking him, Sean, he's like, dude, I'm locked in. I'm good. You know what I mean? Like, he's good, because his basically his story was, I love Coach O'Leary. We had a great conversation on the phone before it got announced publicly. And he got emotional on that call, obviously, because he had been growing this relationship with Coach O'Leary for over a year. Like, he had that type of relationship with him, obviously. But despite that, Ethan had told me that the relationships he has with Marcus Freeman, Al Golden, there's trust there. He trusts Coach Freeman, what he's building, what Al Golden is building on the defensive side of the football. He loves Notre Dame, man.
Well, and that's part of the. This has obviously, been said to death, I think, but by now it's pretty obvious. But when BK was here, the way the head coach was involved was a lot different than the way the head coach is involved with Marcus Freeman right now. So even though the position coaches may sort of be, that first point of contact, Marcus Freeman is still in this process trying to develop relationships with all of these guys along the way, not just the position coach.
That's why it's always so reassuring for Notre Dame recruiting, especially on the defensive side of the football, because Marcus Freeman, I think maybe I don't want to say overdo it, because that's not the right term, but like he pushes himself to the brink, Sean, as far as time management, man. Like, he spends
all these flights that were going on in December, right? Like
he talks to everyone, man, and every one of these kids that commit to Notre Dame, you never hear a single one of them that don't mention a great relationship with Marcus Freeman, right? They talk to him regularly, that he's been paramount in selling Notre Dame football and all those miscellaneous things. Coach Freeman is very heavily involved, and he was very heavily involved in Ethan Long. We also can't discount Chad Bowden in this one as well. Chad was a guy that I know was very high on Ethan as well since the beginning, since they first got him on camp, to camp at Notre Dame, not this past offseason, the offseason before. So, yeah, I think that for me, like, the other relationships was important. And this is why you do tandem recruiting, right? Like, the teams that just one recruiter talks to one coach talks to a recruit, and that's it. That's who really loses players, right? And
especially this time of year, because I mean, just look at how deep this coaching cycle has gone because of these, different jobs moving here, sort of late in the process once the semester's already started.
And every school has decommitments. I mean, like, Notre Dame has had 2 already in the 2025 class that were once committed and no longer committed to the class, right? But for the most part, why do people decommit from classes, Sean? I mean, typically, right? It's because a lot of times players only worry about the relationship that they have with their position coach. I know we always say, and this is a cliche, but I believe it though, is that you should commit for a school, not a coach. I agree with that. I do. But in reality, that's not the case a lot of times, right? Players follow coaches all the time. It happens. But the thing about Notre Dame is that a lot of players most players that commit to Notre Dame are committing for a much larger vision than just their relationship with one coach. It's a lot larger than that. So that's why I think that probably when you compare Notre Dame to a lot of other schools, the decommitments are on the lower side as far as like percentages and total numbers, because for the most part, if you're committed to Notre Dame, you're committing to a lot bigger than just a coaching relationship. It's the 4 for 40. It's the degree. It's playing football at the highest level. It's being on TV every week. Like, all those types of things fold into this pitch overall.
Right. All right. So what about the other commit, Ivan Taylor? Where are they with him right now?
So you're good. You're in a good place with Ivan Taylor. This one, it's so funny because Ivan Taylor in a vacuum, Sean, like, he doesn't worry me in the sense of he's not a kid that made an impulsive decision. Like, this is one where he was on board. His family was on board. Everybody loves Notre Dame. They really do, right? So when it happens, I didn't go to the impulse of, oh, he's going to decommit, blah, 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 blah. Like some people are probably jumped to those conclusions. But it does make you semi-worried in his case because he had about as good a relationship as I've ever seen of a player to a coach. I literally interviewed him multiple times. Chris O'Leary was the first name out of his mouth every single time. Then I had his father, Ike Taylor, played with the Steelers, and Danielle Taylor, his mom, on there. And Sean, no BS. I asked, why Notre Dame? Like a very broad, random question. Or not random, but very broad question.
Very broad.
And the first thing out of both of their mouths was, the relationship he has with Chris O'Leary is unreal. Like they're like best friends. They have this like just crazy relationship, this incredible bond. So comparative to Ethan Long, I was slightly more worried about Ivan than I was about Ethan, to be honest with everybody, right? To be full transparent. But after talking to Ivan, he also, I'm in, man. Like I'm good. I think he's firm in his commitment because, again, it wasn't just about Chris O'Leary. If you know his mom, Danielle, very, very religious person that loves Notre Dame, just loves it. His dad is infatuated with the Notre Dame culture, Marcus Freeman. They have family supports, and then Ivan also loves the program himself. So I think you're solid with Ivan. This was definitely one where I honestly just felt bad for him, to be honest with you. Like I was checking in with him multiple times, not because I thought he was going to decommit, because I thought he was wavering, any of that stuff. It was because he had a great relationship with the guy. And we really lose focus of that sometimes where it's like, he had a great relationship with Chris O'Leary. I hope he's okay, right? Like it's almost like losing a friend, isn't it? Like a little bit. It's a little tough, man. But ultimately, do I think Ivan Taylor's solid Notre Dame? Yes. Do I think he stays in the class? Yes. Do I think he ends up signing with Notre Dame? Yes. I believe all those things right now. I have no reason to believe that he wouldn't at this point.
Okay. So then the third guy, not committed yet, but someone that they have obviously been talking to quite a bit. He's got an official visit planned for June, I believe, and that is JaDon Blair. So where does things stand with Blair right now?
Man, he's one of my favorites recruits in this class, regardless of if he ends up with Notre Dame or not. 6'4", 180 plus pounds. He is out of Winston-Salem, North Carolina, Mount Tabor High School. Sean, it's hard to watch him sometimes and be like, man, that looks like Kyle Hamilton. Like it does, man. Like he moves like that. He's incredibly long. He's a difference maker. He's like top 30 player by at least one platform in 2025. And you are correct. He is visiting Notre Dame June 7th through 9th is his official visit. And there's already 3 players locked in to official visits that weekend. Like that's going to be a huge weekend for Notre Dame overall. Despite Notre Dame having 2 safeties in the class already and having another corner in Creed Thomas that I believe could also play safety eventually if Notre Dame wanted him to, they are pushing hard for JaDon Blair. He's a player that they want very much. I would say as of now, if I'm just talking about just kind of his recruitment in general, Notre Dame and Penn State are probably the 2 top schools for him. They're fighting back and forth with him to get him out of the state of North Carolina. Now, things are in a great spot. Great spot. Had a great relationship with the coaching staff, Chad Bowden, Marcus Freeman, Chris O'Leary. Really likes Notre Dame. The minute he visited for the first time, I think it really changed his perspective on Notre Dame. Like, I think he liked Notre Dame. I think when he got on campus, he started to love Notre Dame. Like, I think that's kind of what happened there. Now, where are things? Full transparency. He said, to be completely honest with you, this is something that I'm going to have to evaluate. I'm going to have to take a step back, and I'm just going to kind of have to let things happen a little bit. He's not in a rush, so it's not a like this is over type of situation, right? Because he's going to take his official visits, then he's going to commit sometime most likely in July. It's kind of the timeline for JaDon Blair. He told me that when Chris O'Leary was about to announce, the whole coaching staff basically had called JaDon Blair and told him, dude, we want you, whether Chris O'Leary is here or not, we want you a part of this class. And he has a great relationship with Coach Freeman. Great relationship with Chad. So all that to say, Sean, is that it's one of those situations where the next few weeks are going to be so vital to this recruitment. You had so much momentum with JaDon Blair. Losing Chris O'Leary potentially halts that a little bit. So now this is up to Mike Mickens. This is up to Marcus Freeman. This is up to Al Golden, the defensive staff, to make JaDon Blair feel wanted and to continue to improve their relationships, because I still believe Notre Dame can win this in the end. It's a blip in the radar, but as long as they develop a great relationship and continue to push for him heavy and then knock that official visit out of the park, I think they still have a good chance with the talented safety out of North Carolina.
Okay. All right. Well, that's very good news then. So Brent asked, he said, Ivan Taylor decommitted, but Ryan sold on him staying in the class. That's
what
I'm not sure where that comes from. Is that anything?
Unless something just broke and I am completely unaware of it, which I will check here. But I hope that Brent is messing with me, because that is not at all what I believe has happened. So give me 10 seconds here, Shauna. This is how you stall on a podcast to make sure that yeah. So no, that is not at all true. The only thing I see is him continuing to verify. And my last conversation with him an hour ago was that he is still in the class, and that is no issue there. So don't know where that came from, Brent. Brent, stop messing with me, man. Don't do that, especially when I'm on a podcast. Like, come on, dude. Don't do that with me right now. Obviously, jokes, right?
So if Mike Mickens does indeed end up being in charge of the entire secondary, what do you think this ultimately means, for the recruiting of both positions, both the safeties and the cornerbacks going forward?
I mean, I think the familiarity is big for a lot of recruits, because I think the thing is, too, Sean, is that, I'm going to use JaDon Blair as an example. JaDon knows Mike Mickens. He's been on campus. He's met him, obviously. He has somewhat of a relationship with him. I think that the familiarity would be a big thing, right? Because when you bring in a coach from the outside, it's pretty much like a from scratch situation, usually, unless they hit a early relationship. Like Mike Brown with, I just talked to Raiden Vines Bright, who's a wide receiver out of IMG Academy. And he had a relationship with Mike Brown already, because Mike Brown was recruiting him at Wisconsin. So that's a little bit of an easier transition from one school to the next. But if you bring in a guy that has no relationship with a JaDon Blair, then you have to build that thing up from scratch. It has to happen quickly too. I think Mike Mickens' familiarity is a good thing. And ultimately, I think he's a great coach, man. I think he's a really good coach. I don't know how great of a safeties coach he is, but if you're a really good defensive back coach in general, a cornerback coach, I have to imagine you have the wherewithal and the chops to be able to be a really good coach in the secondary. So I think the familiarity would be a good thing for them.
I think so as well. And I mean, it does obviously essentially double his recruiting responsibilities in terms of the guys that he's got to count. But I was thinking about it. It's like, well, no more so than a defensive line coach or an offensive line coach, for example, where you have more guys at those positions. So I don't see it being a negative by any means, just based on everything we know about Mike Mickens and his own relationship building and just everything else. And I mean, look at the kind of talent that he's bringing into Notre Dame. Like, I can't see it being a negative with him potentially being in charge of all of it.
We know that he's a big stickler on fundamentals. We know that he's a guy that has experience, obviously, on the back end, both as a coach and a player, obviously, right? So those fundamentals, I think, are going to translate well if he does end up being just the secondary coach instead of just the cornerback coach. And I would also say this, Sean, is Mike Mickens is a different recruiter than Chris O'Leary in style. I don't think they have the same style, but Mike Mickens is a very good recruiter. He can relate to kids. I mean, I remember one of the best conversations I had was Devin Williams, who's in the 2025 class, a cornerback out of Buford. And he had said basically that Mike Mickens one day checked in with him and was just like, hey, Devin, I just want to make sure, I know we have a great relationship. What can I do better for you in this recruitment to make this a more pleasurable one, that make this a better experience for him? And Devin was like, no coach had ever asked me that before. And it was so refreshing. It was great to hear, and it helped develop the relationship even further. So I think Mike Mickens is a great recruiter. I think he's a stickler for the technique and aspects of playing the defensive back position just in general. I think it would be a pretty smooth transition. It's a lot on one person's plate, but I think Coach Mickens has shown that he can make that type of transition.
Michael wants to know if you have any thoughts on Max Bulla's potential as a recruiter and former linebacker or future linebacker coach.
A lot of good. I've gotten a lot of good feedback early. I have. Now, obviously, there's been a lot of help given to him, right? Like he's got Al Golden, he's got Marcus Freeman, he's got Marcus Freeman was a pretty dang good linebacker coach, right? So he's got that relatability to linebackers that are on the board. But I will say, Kingston Viliamoasa, who was in the 2024 class, now on campus. Max Bullough was big in that one, man. He was. Al Washington had his part. Al Golden had his part. Marcus Freeman had his part. But Max Bullough was the guy that was kind of coming in late there and really had to show Kingston, like, hey, man, I know ball, right? Like, and I can help you become the best version of yourself on the next level as your linebacker coach. So I think I've gotten some good early feedback. He's got some good relationships with some 2025 kids, including a couple that he's offered recently as well. So I think it would end up being very good. But obviously, it is a little bit of a question mark until he's actually the number one recruiter in the board.
Yeah. TBD. Jesse's here. Hello, Jesse.
Hello, everyone.
Everyone has glasses on today. Look at this, man.
That's true.
Crazy.
They say it's a sign of intelligence.
I think so. I tell my wife that all the time. It's like, you picked me out because I had glasses on. I looked very distinguished and intelligent. So
I wanted to throw a couple of these up here before Ryan leaves and Jesse and I jump into some rapid fire. D-Rock Irish said that according to Pete Themmel, Boston College working toward hiring Tim Lewis as the school's next defensive coordinator, longtime NFL assistant who's worked for 6 different franchises. Once Bill O'Brien got that BC job, and I know that there were a lot of fans like, oh, what if Al Washington goes and becomes the defensive coordinator? Personally, I always felt like, as the guy who finished as the runner-up, for a head coaching job, like it would be more awkward than anything going to work for someone who you were competing for the job for. So I never felt like that was a realistic option. I don't know what you guys thought about that.
I thought defensive coordinator was interesting because technically, because you're right, he would have technically not gotten the head coaching job comparative, right? But technically, defensive line coach up to defensive coordinator is still a raise, right? Like that's still a promotion. That's still a step up in the recruiting hierarchy. I mean, in the coaching hierarchy. So I was still interested to see if that was something that Coach Washington was interested in or heavily favored in, because Sean, I know we talked about it, but he played at Boston College. He was a defensive line coach at Boston College. He spent time, obviously, on the coaching staff. So Washington does have a lot of ties in BC, but ultimately, I guess they are going a different route, which is good for Notre Dame. It's good for Notre Dame.
Yeah, I think so, too. For sure. Tommy Gunn said the intelligent, talking about glasses, the intelligent thing to do is get LASIK. He said, I actually got LASIK 20 plus years ago. And here's the thing. And I was about to say that they don't tell you, but the LASIK people do tell you this. If they're good people, like over time, it's probably going to wear off at some point. And you're at the very least going to need reading glasses. As it turned out, like 20 plus years later, I needed much more than just reading glasses. So like LASIK, and especially depending on, like the shape of your eyes and things like that, because like I had astigmatism. So, that was part of why my eyes changed again. LASIK is not guaranteed to last forever. So keep that in mind if you're thinking about LASIK. I'm not trying to shoot down LASIK. They're not sponsoring anything of ours though, but I had LASIK a long time ago. It was great while it lasted, but eventually it wore off. And here I am with these things again. So
I just haven't saved up the money that it would take to get LASIK. So I just wear these glasses, but I'm blind without my glasses. Like I cannot see. I would be legally blind.
Yours do
I would
look
not be
like
able to drive.
Like Coke bottles, basically.
They're thick.
Yeah.
If I take these off, I can't even see the stop sign. Like if I didn't know it was a stop sign, I wouldn't be able to read the lettering on stop sign if I were 10 feet away, probably.
Man.
What's funny is I'm nearsighted, which means for people out there that don't have glasses, that means that you can see close, but you can't see far away.
Yeah, I'm the same way.
And technically, Jesse, I can drive without glasses, but I told my eye doctor when they told me that, I'm like, I would never do that in my life. That sounds awful. Why would I ever do that? I don't want people to die here.
Right.
Mine are these are bifocals, which is even, so it's like I got to do this to see, it's like I got to look up and down sometimes because of the near and the far and all that good stuff, so hey, getting old. All right. Well, Ryan, I appreciate it. Great stuff as always. Great insights on the recruiting stuff and whatever you decide to do tomorrow with your wife or without. Happy Valentine's Day. Enjoy.
You too, guys. You too. Thank you guys for
Ryan,
having
I
me.
dig the Phillies jacket. That's a nice Phillies jacket.
Hey man, I saw Rob Thompson wear it in the playoffs this year, so I'm like, you know what? That's nice. And then I got it for Christmas. So I was actually about to get it myself, and it was a Christmas present though, so I didn't have to pay for it.
The Phillies are coming out. Oh, are they? I can't remember. The MLB announced today that like 8 teams are getting the new City Connect jerseys this year, and I thought the Phillies were one of them.
I feel like I heard that on the radio on my drive this morning, so I think you are correct in that. I think you are. I have to double check that.
Those are cool because they're supposed to be like, like related to the city of Philadelphia and stuff. So I'll be interested to see what those look like.
Yeah. Yeah. The Sixers have done stuff with that too, where they have like the city skyline and all that type of stuff too. So yeah, it's pretty dope.
It's bad for someone like me. They market that stuff for people like me because they know I'll just, go and
go out and buy everything.
Buy it all.
That's right. That's right. You know what?
Folks.
Before you leave, Ryan, I want to ask, because you two are same age demographic, basically.
Yep.
And I was thinking about this. Patrick Mahomes was on the McAfee show today, and McAfee has become obviously a very
he was sober
guy. He was straight up sober. Where are you guys, younger demographic? Where are you guys on the McAfee show? I'm curious.
Man, I don't really watch it that much. I mean, I think it's entertaining at times, but Pat's a little bit too much for me. Like he's just a little bit. I'm more like traditional sports talk, man, where like I think you need a balance, right? Like I'm cool with guys getting uppity and getting like super like, loud and all that type of stuff at times, but it's like
so you like really WFAN and like going back and forth and
man.
Like East Coast sports talk radio, pure sports talk radio is what
I listen to WIP here in Philly, and like I feel like I need a good balance of we can get uppity and get like super rah-rah, but then also like there has to be intelligent conversation sprinkled in. And I'm not saying that there's none in Pat McAfee, but we know why people listen to that, right? Like they want the aggressive takes and the loud and all that type of stuff. It's a little bit of a shtick, obviously.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I don't like seek out to put McAfee on, but if it's on, I wouldn't be like, I absolutely need to turn this off. But it just feels like more of a bro session rather than guys kind of actually like getting into the weeds of stuff. Like, and that's I think kind of what Ryan was getting at there a little bit. It just feels like it's a lot of like locker room talk rather than let's get serious at times. And like, I don't need it to be all one way or the other, but I'd like a nice balance between the two.
That is true. When he doesn't have the guests on, it's definitely more of that, like with the producers and, guys that he has in the studio with him. But he does have, some former players who are in there. Like I still haven't really figured out why AJ Hawk does the show, because even when he's on, he doesn't really talk that much.
He doesn't talk much.
But I mean, the thing that I'll give to Mahomes is like, as much as people want to bash Mahomes, the like players and coaches love him. Like he gets everyone that he wants. I mean, just look at today. He got Patrick Mahomes on the show today. I think he said that he just had Andy Reid on, and like he had Caleb DeBoer, like right after the Alabama stuff. And like literally when you look at his guests every day, it's a who's who. Like the players and coaches are not turned off by that guy by any means. He gets all of them on there, So
I like Nick Saban's, because Nick Saban is obviously very softer spoken and very intelligent, and Pat McAfee is like the complete opposite personality. Right. So it's pretty
yet they get along,
to see them interact. Yeah, it is.
That's what's crazy. They get along. They still speak the same language.
I just want Pat to sit down and put a shirt on occasionally, though, man. That's all. Like, just
you know what I've noticed? I've noticed since like the last big, because I do, I've said before, I'll flip it on and I'll, at least put it on in the background. And that's how I knew that Mahomes was on today. Like I'll put it on in the background, don't always necessarily listen intently, but especially like depending on who the guest is. But since that last Aaron Rodgers, stink came up with Jimmy Kimmel and all that stuff about a month or so ago, he has actually been wearing, he has ditched the tank tops. He has he has worn actual shirts, at times even a polo that he's had on. So I guess he's trying. I think his wife is trying to help him out, like everyone's wife, is trying to help them out with that kind of stuff.
We all grow up sometimes, man. We all grow up.
That's
sometimes.
right.
I like it.
That's right. All right, Ryan. Take care. I'll talk to you next week.
See you guys. Have a good one.
All right.
Sounds good. So you can, of course, read all of Ryan Roberts' recruiting stuff on IB. Go to the Champions Lounge for all the inside stuff as well. You'll find it all right there. Jesse, are you ready for rapid fire?
I'm more than ready for rapid fire. I've been ready for this show all week. I was ready for the chat to be ready. So I think we got a lot to get into today.
We do. We've got a long list. Rapid fire went for like an hour yesterday. Brent Smith has been here waiting for you, stalking you, so he's ready to mix it up.
That's what I mean.
In a little bit. So there's a lot that we can get to today. Let's start with this, though. Sam Hartman, Audric Estime, Joe Alt, Blake Fisher, Javonte Jean-Baptiste, J.D. Bertrand, Maris Leofau, and Cam Hart all got NFL Scouting Combine invitations today. Which of those former Notre Dame players has the most to gain at the Combine?
Yeah, when you start looking at this list, I think three guys very clearly come to mind when talking about who has the most to gain. I think Javonte Jean-Baptiste, Blake Fisher, and Sam Hartman would be your kind of top three guys who have the most to prove. And I think at the top of that list would be Javonte Jean-Baptiste. And then second on my list would be more than likely Sam Hartman. And then third on that list would be Blake Fisher. And I think Javonte Jean-Baptiste has the most to prove because I think he had relatively good tape this season. But if you remember last week, we were talking to Ryan about, Javonte Jean-Baptiste's performance at the Senior Bowl.
Right.
And it felt like it was very underwhelming. And so just kind of hearing that, and a guy who traditionally wasn't an every down defensive lineman until this season, I think he's got the most to prove amongst that group. And he was the most surprising of that group to get an invitation. I didn't know if he would get one.
Yeah, I was not sure what it was going to look like in terms of him, Bertrand, or Leofau. And I just don't know. Like, Bertrand and Leofau are very curious to me. I don't know how much they necessarily have to gain. I think that they can both probably test really well.
Yeah.
But I think with them, it's what's on film that's going to go the farthest for them. So I don't know how much they can necessarily gain by this thing. I think you're right about Jean-Baptiste because of that Senior Bowl, maybe a lackluster, if that's the way, if that's what you want to call it. He does have a lot to gain, and I think he's got a big opportunity potentially. Blake Fisher, I was going back and forth a little bit on him, like how much can an offensive lineman really gain?
Well, I think
at
too,
the
people are just going to fall in love with his upside still, like his ceiling is there, and he's got a frame that a lot of coaches are going to be googly eye over, right? Like he looks like an NFL offensive lineman. I just don't think he's performed enough to be an NFL lineman. So I think that when you draft someone like Blake Fisher, it's not a project, but I still think it's like a mini project, right? Like he's still got some work to do, but he's got all the tools already there. I think Javonte Jean-Baptiste is much closer to his ceiling than what Blake Fisher is.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I would agree. Yeah, there's still a lot more for Blake Fisher to go to. I do agree with that. I think Audric Estime, I have him. Like, I think he has a lot to gain.
He could really climb the board.
That's what I'm looking at. Like, because he's a running back, because of the position, if he tests well, especially with the speed numbers and shows what kind of hands he has and the agility, I think that he is someone who can potentially, because like a typical running back is going to go third round and later. That's just the way the position is obviously viewed now. But I think Estime, because of, again, like the film that he has, if he can test well and really show out at the Combine, he can push himself like potentially into the like the upper second half of the second round type guy, I think. So I think that he's got a ton to gain. Like
Yeah,
he's
there seems to
the
be
one that
a
I put up there.
disconnect between the numbers that Audric Estime put on the field and the tape, and then how he was perceived by the national media, because he
Right.
wasn't even a Doak Walker finalist, right? But
Right.
he
Which is
led a
nuts.
lot of the country in many like average yards per rush, touchdowns, yards like per he was up there in a lot of statistical categories, but there's some sort of disconnect between that and how he's being viewed by NFL scouts. And so if he can match what he's done all season at the combine and maybe even be better, then I think his stock can definitely rise.
Yeah. As far as Hartman, okay, so here are the quarterbacks who got invited: JaDon Daniels, Sam Hartman, Devin Leary, Drake May, JJ McCarthy, Joe Milton, Bo Nix, Michael Penix, Michael Pratt, Spencer Rattler, Austin Reed, Keaton Slovis, Jordan Travis, and Caleb Williams, of course, got invited. So I think that's pretty important that Hartman did get invited. I still just don't know how much he can improve his stock for, based on where he's at right now. And, again, like we talked last week, the practice versus the actual game in the Senior Bowl, he didn't seem to have, a great Senior Bowl experience all the way around, whether it was practice or the game. So I'm not sure how much upside there is for Sam Hartman still being a 6-year
I
guy
think
and everything else.
With Sam Hartman, it was just important to get that invite, because when you
Yeah.
look at that list, like if you saw that list at the beginning of the season, right? And like imagine going back August 15th and you look at that list and you say, this is the list of guys who are going to get invited to the combine. Really, the only people that I would scratch my head about are Austin Reed and Keaton Slovis from BYU, right? And so I think Sam Hartman getting that invite and being on that list is a big thing in itself. But I think really, I feel like Sam Hartman would benefit for something like the combine, because I think he's a guy who is a quarterback that's driven about, rhythm, timing routes and stuff like that. And so I think that's why he struggled in the game itself, is because I don't think he had that rhythm and connection with his wide receivers. But that doesn't matter at the combine. I think he's a combine type quarterback, a practice type quarterback who's going to throw a lot of nice balls and test well in combine setting, and how that translates over to the game, I'm not sure, but I still think if he can put a show on at the combine, you might get distracted from his actual kind of game performance.
I think he'll test well, and I think that he'll also interview very well. Yes. When he sits down with teams, he's going to impress a lot of teams just with his personality, his intelligence, and the whole thing. So I think you're right. Like, it is very important just that he got invited and gets to go through this process, because I think that up close is going to potentially do, it can do him some good. I guess.
Really, when you look at that list, I think JaDon Daniels, Drake May, Caleb Williams are the guys who stick out. But I think Sam Hartman is he's going to be a lot closer to Bo Nix and Michael Penix than what a lot of people realize. So I think I really think as long as he shrinks that gap between kind of like that middle tier of these quarterbacks, that should be really his objective.
Oh, Bryce, I know you can't be serious about this. He said Caleb Williams is going to be third round.
Him and Brent Smith must be good friends.
Wishful thinking, very wishful thinking. He might be, he will not only not be third round, he won't even be number 3 pick. So. Sorry, note, Bryce.
I
realize it's a Notre Dame crowd, and people have their Caleb Williams, opinions, but just don't quite see that happening. Okay, so this is defensive back Jordan Clark. He's the son of ESPN analyst, former NFL player Ryan Clark. Jordan Clark transferred from Arizona State to Notre Dame last month. He's a grad student here now, and he suffered a leg injury in his second game of last season at Arizona State, and he talked about it late last week when we got to speak with him for the first time. So here's what he had to say about that.
I had a really bad quad contusion, and it swelled up. I had to get 300 cc's of blood drawn out of my leg towards the end of the year. It was a nagging thing for sure. I wasn't really healthy for the majority of the year, but ultimately I feel like if you can play, you should play. And I was able to make it happen. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, it's not an excuse for anything. But I wasn't healthy the majority of last year. I'm excited to be healthy this year. I love this. Like, this is what I've wanted to do my entire life. And I think having the opportunity to do it, I don't want to waste any games. I don't want to waste any opportunities that I have to go out there and play, especially with my brothers. Like, there were guys on that team that I'm never going to play with again. So if I can't play, I'm always going to play. And I'm going to compete, honestly. I'm delusional. I think that whether I'm 40%, 30%, that I'm going to win. So ultimately, yeah, it was tough being hurt, but it didn't really affect me too much.
And I'm trying to remember now, Jesse, because I've heard the different clips a few times. Did he mention the fact that he had blood, like, withdrawn from that leg? Okay. Yeah. So when you hear all that, what do you think of Jordan Clark when you hear him talk about all that stuff?
Toughness. I mean, that's really the first word that came to mind, and resiliency as well, because I'm going to break it to a lot of people, and I'm sure a lot of people know this. Like, football players are usually hurt the entire season. Some sort of injury, some
difference
sort of
between hurt and injured is
right. And so there's always stuff that's nagging. And I just think it shows, his toughness, his resiliency, and his overall commitment to kind of the overall bigger picture. He's putting, the team over his own personal, health, success, that sort of stuff, pain. And it shows that his goals, the bigger goal is how he can contribute to the team. It's not all about, himself. So I think when you're talking about Notre Dame and the type of defense that they have, I think he's a perfect fit.
No, I absolutely agree. And like, to hear him start talking about that, it's like, oh, I had blood withdrawn and deep thigh contusion and all that different kind of stuff. And I think it makes you look at, like, when you start to look at his film from last year, which was solid, not necessarily spectacular, but, really good. And he's obviously very experienced. But then you throw that into the equation, the fact that he played the last 10 games with all that going on, and the fact that they did have to do that to his leg, while he's going through that, it definitely, again, this is the son of Ryan Clark. You see Ryan Clark on TV all the time. So I think you automatically sort of, and he talked about this as well, that's automatically going to change sort of how you look at this guy. He's the son of an NFL player and all that kind of stuff. So you start going, well, is there entitlement, or, does he work for what he's got? And then you hear, again, like him going through this kind of stuff. And it just really, I think, makes you appreciate a guy like that even more. Like, and we know that there were guys for Notre Dame who were going, who played through injuries / being hurt, again, to whatever degree that you want to call it. But you bring a guy in with that kind of toughness factor, and he's got all these other intangibles that go with it. I just think that that's nothing but good. It's the kind of guy that you want on your team, especially when you hear him, talk like that. It's like, look, I want to be out there. This is what I want to be, this is what I want to be doing. And you hear him say that, and I think it's pretty cool. You got a guy like that you add to your team. And again, you look at his play a little bit differently, knowing that he was playing through that kind of stuff last year. So here's Clark on the pitch that Notre Dame made him when he made his visit to Notre Dame in December, when he was deciding on where he was going to go.
They just had it all set up to show me that why I fit in their defense. It wasn't like they were just coming to get me because I was a guy in a position of need that had hit the portal. They wanted to let me know that it was specific to me, like I fit the role. And I think that kind of attention to detail and them really knowing me, having really studied and watched my film and showing me how I fit here, that meant everything to me. So, that, and then Coach Golden being in the NFL, all the knowledge and things that I can take from him while I'm here, it was a no-brainer.
And I thought that, kind of adding on to that, it wasn't part of this clip, but he talked about it in a shorter, little thing later. They put clips of him and Thomas Harper side by side when they were sitting down with him and showing him, like, this is you. This is what Thomas Harper was doing for us. This is how we see you fitting into the defense because he's going to play the same position, that nickel position. So again, what do you think when you hear Jordan Clark talk about that?
Yeah, I think that Notre Dame is doing a tremendous job of, they're not just going to the top talented players in the portal and be like, we need you, right? They're going and showing, giving a presentation, I guess you could say,
right,
of why this player fits into their scheme. And I think that it goes a long way with players because it shows that you put the time and effort in to give them specifics about how they're going to fit and not just a bunch of blanket statements and ultimately maybe even lies, right? Like, this is, you're the top rated player. This is how it's going to fit. They're giving him specific examples based, like I said, a presentation, PowerPoint presentation on how it's going to go. And I thought another key thing that Clark said was he added on that, without Golden's NFL experience, that was a big deciding factor as well. Yep. And I think that goes for more than just people than Ryan, or for people more than Clark, right? Because and I think that's why Al Golden is so important to Notre Dame and their success recently is he's running a scheme that's going to translate to the NFL. And if these guys have aspirations to go to the NFL, you want the best shot at success at the next level. And so when you combine, Al Golden's experience, you combine that Notre Dame has done their homework and shown this guy, hey, this is you side by side, someone else in our defense, and this is why we think you're going to be better at it.
Right.
It's just like, how do you say no to something like that?
Yeah. Like listening to it, because RJ Oben talked about some of the same kind of stuff about how when he came in, that Al Washington and Marcus Freeman were sitting down with him and showing him, like Javonte Jean-Baptiste kind of stuff, because that's where RJ Oben is going to play, same side, the strong side defensive end. And, again, like the same with Jordan Clark, the fact that they're not just, like you said, they're not just saying, hey, let's go, like, here's this guy looks pretty good, let's go see what he's got to offer. They're already prepared for him. They've talked about it before that, like, you can't wait until these guys enter the transfer portal and then start doing your homework. You've got to be up on them right away. So, like, when you wonder sometimes what some of those analysts are doing, there is probably a list that they have some of these analysts tracking, and as the season goes on, or maybe late in the season, they're starting to look at that and like, okay, these guys could be transfer portal type guys. Let's get some film on these guys and have it ready to go and start looking at them and seeing, do we want this guy or not? They've obviously done a lot of homework on very specific guys, and I think that work is paid off for them. It paid off last year, and when you look at these kind of guys this year, because again, they're addressing specific needs. It's not like they're using the transfer portal as a roster overhaul.
Right. They're not just going to the portal and saying, we need a wide receiver. Give us the biggest name wide receiver out there. They have preparation, they have notes, and they're finding the guy that fits the mold to how their defense is going to be best executed.
Right. Tommy asked this earlier. I didn't get to this when Ryan was still here. This has been the craziest offseason since blank, he asks. Do you think I actually think that last offseason was crazier than this offseason with all the stuff with Tommy Rees leaving all of a sudden.
Hartman.
And like Hartman coming in, and
I guess my argument would
that happened with Ludwig and all that stuff.
So like my argument would be quarterback again this year. So Leonard and Hartman kind of cancel each other.
Yeah.
Offensive coordinator again, because Tommy Rees left unexpectedly. And I would say that, what's his name? I don't know why I can't think of the guy that just left for Troy.
Jared Parker.
Jared Parker left unexpectedly, right? Like no one expected him to leave after 1 year for a head coaching job. So those two cancel each other out. And then the thing that's like the tipping of the scale.
Tommy said his question wasn't Notre Dame based.
Oh,
but okay. I just assumed that it was. But go ahead. What were you going to say? The tipping what?
If we're looking at this Notre Dame specific, the tipping point on the scale for me is like, when's the last time Notre Dame had to fire a coach in the manner that they kind of had to fire Stuckey?
Right.
And so that's kind of the tipping point for me of why it might have been crazier, is because you saw a lot of parallels, again, between Leonard and Hartman and the offensive coordinator situation, but I can't remember a time Notre Dame had to
You still can't think of
I don't know.
Parker.
It's been a long day. That's blatantly had to fire a coach like that, right? And so I don't like that's not good look on Notre Dame. And I can't remember there's been a moment like that where, you know, a coach had to be ultimately dismissed, right? For such a lack of performance and a lack of relationships with players and stuff. And when you hear that, like us as a fan base, we were just like, really? Like that's so toxic, right? And so I guess I hadn't seen kind of like that toxicity around Notre Dame football so much. And like, and to the point where like Marcus Freeman got vocal with him in a public setting where a lot of people heard too. So like that was what would make this season a little bit crazier for me. And then all of the wide receivers, you know, following after that, essentially deciding to leave.
Yeah, I think if you open it up to more nationally, and I agree with what you're saying on Chancey Stuckey, that is a very unique situation, obviously. So that, you know, that was a little bit crazy. But like when you look at the fact that two of the best coaches of all time, one in the NFL and one in college football, Bill Belichick and Nick Saban, both gone at the same time, you know, in the same offseason, basically within just freaking days of each other, that alters things. And then you look at the ripple effect that that's had. Jim Harbaugh going back to the NFL, Caleb DeBoer leaving a team that played for a national championship to go take over at Alabama, you know, and just all these other things that have, you know, the trickle down effect that all of these things have had. I think if you start with Saban and Belichick, it's definitely been a crazy offseason. And like, I don't think that we ever would have thought that we would have seen that going on at the same time. So with the Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes winning 3 of the last 5 Super Bowls, do you now buy or sell them as the NFL's new villains?
This is, I have 2 answers for this question. In terms of winning and success, I do think you have to buy them as the villains, right? Like this is a dynasty at this point. And the scariest part about this dynasty is that the last 2 years were supposed to be reload years for the Chiefs, specifically this last season, right? Like this year was supposed to be kind of like, all right, let's rebuild and get some depth back at, you know, some critical roster spots, etc. Well, Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid still won the Super Bowl, right? And everyone was like, oh, well, they got rid of Tyreek Hill. What can they really do? Well, they have 2 Super Bowls ever since getting rid of Tyreek Hill. And so, like, this season, they got it done with an old tight end and a rookie wide receiver and Patrick Mahomes, essentially. And, of course, an incredible defense. I don't personally see them as villains, though, because, like, Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid, like, I can't look at them and be like, I hate you guys, you know?
Yeah,
like,
I mean,
I have respect for them more than I have villainous, you know, thoughts about them.
When I look at the alternatives, like even though I'm not a Chiefs fan because of where I'm from and everything else, I would still rather see, like if I have to see a team win a whole bunch of games and win a bunch of championships, and because of who that, you know, those 2 guys you just mentioned, Mahomes and Reid, I would definitely rather see them than a lot of other teams. But, you know, like even like back in the early Patriots days when they won their back-to-back Super Bowls and, you know, everything else, I never really despised, you know, either Tom Brady or Belichick or the Patriots. It's a lot of what you're talking about, respected it. Now, where things started to turn a little bit, obviously, was when you started to hear about Spygate and, you know, just like Belichick's personality and all that stuff. But like the Brady stuff, I still, you know, like never really minded that much, you know, and I realize, you know, like Vince would, you know, be out here wanting to strangle me for saying that since he's a Michigan guy and all that. So they obviously, but it was much easier, I think, because of Belichick for them to become the NFL's villains. But I mean, it basically, it happens with every team that becomes a dynasty. The more you win, you're going to have, just like with Notre Dame, you're going to have your share of the bandwagon fans, but you're also going to start building a lot more haters because everyone wants to be, like, I guarantee you, Buffalo doesn't see, you know, Buffalo already sees Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid as the villains,
right?
You know, and some of these other teams, you know, like San Francisco is probably feeling it right now. I don't know if Brent is still here or not, but they've lost 2 of these Super Bowls to them. So, you know, Me personally, I don't necessarily see them in that light, but I do think because they have now won 3 in 5 years, and Patrick Mahomes is so young, and the odds are that they're just going to keep on winning, despite the fact that there are so many other good young quarterbacks in the NFL. It's only natural that they're going to, for whatever people don't already consider them the villains, a lot more people are going to see them in that light now going forward.
I agree. And, I think a question came up in the chat that I'm curious to see your response on. The context is off, but did you have a problem with Kelsey and Andy Reid's moment on the sideline during the game like a lot of people did?
No.
I thought it was blown way out of proportion. I think you have a player.
Now, did it look probably, worse than it was? Yeah. But I mean, Kelsey basically wanted to be on the field, and he was pissed that he wasn't on the field.
Yeah, that's what it came down to. Is he's so ultra competitive, and he had basically zero receptions and 0 yards in the first half. He was just letting his coach know that I want to contribute. This is the Super Bowl. I'm our best offensive weapon,
right?
And I just think that.
And the guy that
Andy off
the guy that the tight end who was on the field instead of him was supposed to block is the guy who made the play on the Pacheco fumble.
Right?
And he's not happy about it, and he's like. He's literally the best tight end in the game. So I had no problem with it.
Now, I mean, honestly, to me, he's the greatest tight end of all time because he just what he's done in the playoffs with Patrick Mahomes, they've surpassed all of Gronk's and Brady's records. I hold Kelsey up there as just as important of a guy as Patrick Mahomes in terms of their playoff success. Right. And it's just the competitor coming out of him on the sideline. I think they have enough respect for each other. It goes back to the
Jordan Clark stuff that we were talking, and it's not like, we don't know if Jordan Clark is going to blow up and stuff, but he's talking about playing through injuries, stuff that Kelsey has done, stuff that Mahomes has done. But like, you want guys who want to go out there and compete. And obviously Travis Kelce wants to go out there and compete. And that's what that was about. And like Chief Brody says, I would have punched the guy in the face if he talked to me like that. Well, that's why Andy Reid is where he is right now, because he has the kind of personality. He's had those kind of things happen in the past. He knows the guys that he's got in his team. He has, there's a different relationship that he and Travis Kelce has. He knows Travis Kelce. They've got the kind of relationship that, Travis Kelce can get pissed like that. And look, it's the NFL. It's not college,
These are all grown men.
Yeah, that's right. So, yeah. Reid did have T.O. He had him for a couple of years, but he had him. So we're going to talk about Kelsey more here in just a little bit. TD4ND. So I'm separating Travis Kelce, the player, and the competitor from some of the other stuff. So just know that as we'll have that come up here in a little bit. But on the Andy Reid subject, 258 career wins. He's 44 behind Bill Belichick, who is 26 wins behind Don Shula for the most wins in NFL history. Scale of 1 to 10, what chance do you give Reid to have more wins than Belichick when their careers are over?
Yeah, so let's start doing a little bit of math here, right? So he's 44 behind Belichick, who's 26 behind Shula. You combine those two numbers together, that's about 70 more wins. And that's assuming, Bill Belichick has basically said that that's kind of his last milestone, right? So he
wants to pass Shula.
I don't see him hanging around much longer after that type situation. So
the question is he going to get a job next year,
right,
to have a chance to?
So let's add, of that 70, let's add 10 more games, say 80 games that Reid has to win, overall to catch him. So 80 divided by 17 is basically 5 seasons. And that's assuming that they go undefeated every season. So do I think Andy Reid has 5 to 10 years left in the tank? I do, because he's going to ride it out with Patrick Mahomes. Those two are going to ride that thing out in Kansas City as long as possible. And if they keep having success, which I think that they will, I think it's going to get really close down to the end. And I think Andy Reid himself might hang around a little bit if he's close to the line of, Belichick or Shula, whoever it ends up being.
Well, and he's going to gain a year on Belichick because Belichick's not going to be coaching this year. So Reed is averaging around 12 wins in the regular season alone, and postseason wins count for this total as well. So like you add another at least 2 to 3, depending on how far they go. 12 times 4 is 48, 14 times 4 is 56. And again, we're talking about catching Belichick. He's only 44 wins behind him. I'm putting this at a solid 9 because, Reed is also 7 years younger than Belichick. And what does Andy Reid have? You just said it. He's got Patrick Mahomes. Like, why would you, and Mahomes is only 28 years old. Why would you walk away from that? Like, his coaching career began in 1982 when Joe Montana wasn't even like considered the GOAT, at that point, so we're talking about 3 to 4 GOATs ago, right? Like Bart Starr and Johnny Unitas were probably considered the best quarterbacks of all time at that point when Andy Reid's coaching career began. So he's been doing this forever. If you've been doing this that long, why would you quit when you have Patrick Mahomes to attach yourself to? Because that's the thing too, is even if Belichick does get back in, which I think is really 50-50 at best right now, based on all the things you hear about how those interviews went, like some of the concerns that people had were, 1, he wanted too much control, and 2, the way he handled the quarterback situation post Brady and, how he handled the draft post Brady. Like there's a lot of questions just in terms of, well, this guy wants all this control and player, draft and all this different stuff. How much can we actually trust him based on how things went in New England? So I give Andy Reid, like, don't you think Andy Reid has at least 7 more years? Probably in him?
I think Andy Reid, I think his retirement is between like 72 and 75. He will definitely get into his 70s as a head coach. And, a lot of people are in here saying, Andy Reid's success is tied directly to Patrick Mahomes. I disagree with that. He had a lot of success before getting with the Chiefs. He just didn't have the quarterback to put him over the top, right? Like,
and that's Donovan McNabb was good, but he is not Patrick Mahomes.
Right.
Good. Like
and
they went, you got to remember, like it wasn't because they had bad teams. They went to 4 straight NFC championship games and a Super Bowl, and then another NFC championship game a couple years later. So it wasn't, it was like he was just the guy who's kind of like where Kyle Shanahan is right now. He was much younger in his career still. He didn't have Patrick Mahomes, I think, is the biggest thing, but he was also, like some of the things that were kind of dogging him early in his Chiefs career was like, clock management, game management type stuff. He hadn't quite got over that hump, but I think, we've seen having someone who is at the very least in the conversation already at 28 years old for the best quarterback in NFL history, that can cover up some of those other mistakes, right? And to me, that's the biggest difference because he's also got a better defense right now. He had good defenses in Philly, but he doesn't have what he had right now.
I do agree. And, I found something from about a year and a half ago, so it doesn't account for this season. Don Shula, 9.94 wins per season. George Halas, 7.95. Bill Belichick, 6.3. Tom Landry, 8.62. Andy Reid, 10.13. He's got more wins per season than any of those guys, right? So he's winning. It's just Patrick Mahomes has really put him
right
over the top. And
remember,
I don't think that you can say that that's a kryptonite. That's just a good marriage of the two because Patrick Mahomes isn't good without Andy Reid either.
No, that's absolutely right. Now, like in that interview that I was talking about that he did on McAfee today, Mahomes, like they asked him, why do you think that this marriage between you two guys is, has worked out for both of you so well? And Mahomes said, because Andy Reid lets me be me. And like, if you take that back to that Travis Kelce conversation, that's why Travis Kelce can get away with that, because Andy Reid, his ego isn't such, that he feels like he's being disrespected in the middle of the Super Bowl because a guy, is barking at him because he wants to be on the field. Andy Reid lets his players be themselves. And that's such a big part of it as well. And Mahomes said that if he would have gone to another team, that the odds are that there were a lot of coaches who were going to want to put him into a box and be a certain specific kind of way. Yeah. Like whatever their system is, because, the coaches with their systems, and that whole thing. But that's not Andy Reid. He lets the players be who they are. And that's, what I was getting ready to say is don't forget, like, I think it's 8 division championships in a row that they've won right now. And the first, what was it? At least 2 or 3 of them were with Alex Smith.
Well, that's Alex
before
Smith.
Patrick Mahomes ever
He was
showed
winning
up.
with Alex Smith.
Right. They were winning those division, but again, they weren't going anywhere in the playoffs until they finally got Patrick Mahomes. That's when things changed, is when they got Patrick Mahomes.
Did you see that bit? Alex Smith said he was aware that Andy Reid and the gang were scouting Patrick Mahomes long before the draft. Like they had kind of similar how to Notre Dame was doing with RJ Oben and Jordan Clark and all these players that they're getting out of the portal. They did their homework on Patrick Mahomes, and as soon as it wasn't a matter of it was Patrick Mahomes going to replace Alex Smith. It was just a matter of when, right? Like they had their guy. Andy Reid knew that this is the guy that he wanted for his team. And I don't know. I think that goes a long way. Andy Reid called his shot, essentially, in my opinion.
Yep. So probably the most underrated aspect of this year's Chiefs team is Steve Spagnuolo's defense. They held Brock Purdy to 255 passing yards, 60% completion percentage. Brent Smith getting in here just in time. My question, do you see any similarities between what the Chiefs do and what Al Golden's secondary does, Jess?
Yeah, I actually have
did you bring whiteboard for the people?
Yeah, I came with a nice graphic for some
Jesse
players.
brought whiteboard.
I had a lot to do today, but we still got it done. Go ahead and pull that up for me. Can you see this nice and clear?
I would zoom in a little bit.
Is that a little bit better?
A little bit better. I had to blow up my screen, but okay. Wow.
So,
there's a lot of numbers there.
Yeah. So I want you to look at far left. That'll give you some better context. That's opponent. And then next to the opponent is the 49ers. So this is every game from the 49ers this season. And so, when I was watching this game, it felt like the 49ers were expecting zone coverage on the back end of a lot of Kansas City's blitzes, which was really smart, based on some tendencies. So often Debo was the primary read in the drop back game, right? But the problem is the Chiefs were playing man while sending extra pressure, and they have great corners on the back end who were able to really just stick it, to Debo. And so what this is looking at is I have some numbers highlighted in red, and those are the important numbers. And what this is showing is in the bottom left here, the Chiefs played cover 0 against the 49ers on 21% of the snaps. They played cover 1 40% of the snaps. So altogether, they were playing man 64% of the time against the San Francisco 49ers, but they were doing this while showing zone, blitzing, and then playing a lot of man on the backside of this. So the question is, how does this relate, to Al Golden? I think this directly relates to Al Golden because what does Notre Dame have? They have tremendous corners, and what does Al Golden like to do? He likes to bring pressure and play a lot of man and cover 0. And this is why it worked against Brock Purdy and an inexperienced quarterback, in my opinion. Brock Purdy didn't know how to handle those pre-snap looks of getting zone and being able to adjust to man while also having pressure in his face. And that's what we see Al Golden do so much with Notre Dame is he is bringing a lot of pressure and playing man on the backside of it, but also showing zone pre-snap. And if you start thinking about it, what game does that remind you of? That reminds me of the Caleb Williams game against USC this season where he threw all the interceptions. He was getting pressure in his face, and Notre Dame was playing man on the backside of it, but showing zone, up front at the line of scrimmage. And that's ultimately what led to Caleb Williams' downfall. If you don't have an uber talented quarterback like Patrick Mahomes and maybe Justin Herbert and, some of the top end quarterbacks in our league, you're going to give those types of quarterbacks a lot of trouble when you're bringing pressure into their face and they can't determine pre-snap what's going on. And so I felt that Brock Purdy in the Super Bowl game was the limiting factor. And if they had a quarterback that was a little bit closer to Patrick Mahomes' level, I think they would have won that game. But you have to give credit to Spagnuolo of showing a ton of zone pre-snap and then just honestly having the courage to run so much cover 0 and cover 1 on the backside while bringing blitz. And I just that just reminds me so much of how Al Golden runs this defense, because there's been times where I'm like, why is he blitzing on 3rd down? Why is he blitzing on 2nd down? But the more I think about it, it's the more confusion that you can provide to the quarterback pre-snap to post-snap.
Brent begs to differ with you. He says Purdy was 12 of 18 with 135 yards and a touchdown versus pressure.
He missed the touchdown to there were 2 plays towards the end there where they got pressure in his face and they had wide open wide receivers. It's because Brock Purdy didn't adjust the protection at the line of scrimmage because he thought he was getting zone and they blitzed him and played man. I don't know what else to really say about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think Chris Jones would beg to differ with what Brent is saying, and I think McDuffie would beg to differ with, what he was saying when, you're right. He might have been 12 of 18 overall, but there were 6 incompletions, and of those 6 incompletions, a couple of them came on the most crucial drive of the game when they weren't able to punch it into the end zone, right?
Yeah.
Not saying that that he stunk all the time, but what you're saying, and Tony Romo pointed out some of what you're talking about, like they confused Brock Purdy just enough that it made him ineffective at times. That doesn't mean that he had a horrible game. I don't think anyone's putting the 49ers loss on.
It was
on
just
Purdy,
a chess match the entire game.
Yeah. The 2 biggest differences in the game were Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs defense is what it comes down to. So,
yeah. I just thought that those numbers were interesting because, again, I think
Brent, if they were, he said they're 26th in pass protection. Okay, but they got to the Super Bowl. So, like, what? I don't know.
I mean, Patrick Mahomes had arguably the worst tackle in the league, the most penalized tackle in the league. And I mean, they found a way to get it done. And the 49ers have an all-pro first ballot Hall of Famer, Trent Williams, at their left tackle position. So, I mean, it goes both ways. I'm not trying to sit here and diss any player.
Right.
I'm just pointing out what I noticed about.
Again, the comparison was Chiefs defense to Notre Dame defense and how you can confuse the quarterback at
how
times.
You can confuse a quarterback pre-snap and pressure in their face, right, which what Notre Dame does so much of. Like we've even on this show said that, why is Al Golden blitzing so much? But after watching the game, seeing these numbers, it just makes sense that even if you're not getting home on the blitz, you're still rushing up, an errant pass. You're getting in the quarterback's face. You're changing his reads. You're making him think about things in a split decision, right? And so
right,
that's what Al Golden is so good at, is getting pressure on these quarterbacks and forcing them to make a decision. And okay, sometimes do those decisions, do they not work? Right. It's not going to be successful every time. But what Al Golden and Spags are both basically saying is we're willing to roll the dice and live with the 70% chance that it's going to work and the 30 to 25% chance that it's not going to work.
Brent, come on, man. You're missing the whole point. This is not a knock on the 49ers. Like you're a passionate 49ers fan and that's how you're taking it. That's not even what any of this is meant to talk about, but you're a little bit blind right now because you're still pissed off that Kyle Shanahan sucks. And, I mean, that's what you were saying the whole show yesterday. So, and now we've got people chiming in about penalties. Like, do you remember the defensive holding penalty that helped out the 49ers, the defensive holding penalty on the Chiefs? Do you remember that? Like,
yes.
Would you rather see flags thrown all game? And you remember a year ago when all anybody was talking about the day after the Super Bowl was the penalty. Should it have been a penalty? Do you throw the flag in that situation and all that garbage? Would you rather have that than, what we saw, how the game was officiated? I thought the game was officiated pretty well. There's holding on every play, and whether or not you want to call it is the only question. Like, so don't give me this garbage about the Super Bowl was decided because the referees didn't throw enough flags. I don't want to hear that crap. It was a well played Super Bowl. That's
I thought it was great, and I thought the play that ultimately won the game, not won the game, but really swayed the game, is that double corner blitz on 3rd and 4, and Purdy threw it right into the blitzer, and they knocked it down and had to settle for the field goal in overtime. That won the game for them. Spagnuolo bringing that double corner blitz won the game for them, and that's all I was trying to get at is he dialed up pressures when it mattered most, and it was successful, and I feel like that's how Al Golden runs his defenses. He's willing to roll the dice in high-leverage situations and trust his uber-talented corners on the backside, just like the Chiefs have uber-talented corners, and roll the dice and get pressure on the quarterback. That's all I was trying to say.
Turn the page, fill in the blank. It's blank that the Super Bowl broke an all-time viewership record for any broadcast in the United States with 123.4 million viewers.
It's not a surprise that the Super Bowl broke
again, Josh, you want to say that the NFL had a hand in the Chiefs winning when they threw a defensive holding penalty on the Chiefs in a crucial situation that helped the 49ers, but the 49ers couldn't capitalize on it. But you want to blame the NFL. Okay, cool. Next conspiracy theory. Go ahead, Jess, viewership.
I was not surprised by the viewership on Super Bowl 58. In our rapid fire show leading up to the Super Bowl, I thought that we were going to get, I think the number I threw out there was like 120 million, and it exceeded it. We got 123 million. And I'm not surprised because it involves the Chiefs and it involves all of Taylor Swift's fans as well. And so when you combine the two, you're going to break a record. And, whether the people want to complain about Taylor Swift or not, it worked. It made money for the NFL, and that's ultimately what it comes down to.
That's exactly right. We were guessing our viewership on Friday. I believe I said in the 123 million ballpark. So I'll pat myself on the back for my guess. But all of the above. The Super Bowl every year is the most viewed game ever, and you throw in this Swift factor, and that had a major influence on it, whether a lot of people want to believe it or not. And like Vince was sitting here saying yesterday, his young daughters wanted to watch the Super Bowl because they wanted to see Taylor Swift, and so that had a big impact on it. It helps that it was a good game. It helps that you've got one of the most popular and best players in the NFL right now against a franchise, that's it developed a lot of its own national following back in the 80s, with the success of Joe Montana and all that. So I think it was kind of a perfect storm, and I'm not surprised that it set the record. Chief Brody says it's a television program, doesn't feel like true competition anymore, to be honest. I mean, honestly, the way TV networks look at it, it's all just a television program, regardless of what sport it is. College football, NFL, NBA, college basketball, whatever it happens to be. It's all just a TV program to them, and that's really, what it comes down to. Anthony says he would rather hear Cowboys talk or Cubs talk over Jesse over the Swifties. Well, guess what? Taylor Swift got a total of 54 seconds of airtime during the Super Bowl. 1% of the airtime during the Super Bowl. But people like Anthony can't handle it. Here's my question, though. Have you reached your fill of Swiftie or Travis Kelce exposure, Jesse?
No, I actually love it. Like I saw this video of them, doing their thing in the club afterwards, and then it pans over to Kelsey's brother, who's just like going crazy with the DJ with his Rey Mysterio mask on. Like,
that was hysterical.
The
Jason Kelce aspect of it when you throw him in.
Right. I don't care. Like, I have them blocked on their names blocked on Twitter, and so I don't see tweets about them. But when I see the videos and stuff like that, like, I don't care. I think Kelsey's like, if Kelsey was my friend, like we would get along. Like I think Kelsey is a sweet dude. I think he's good at football and he'd be someone fun to hang out with. And now he's got a girlfriend that everyone's jealous of. So like, I don't care at all, to be honest with you. I don't, it does not bother me.
I honestly, like, I was saying this to Vince yesterday. The Kelsey, like, I've almost reached Kelsey overexposure, though. I think, like, why did he need to be up there on the stage after the game? It's not like he had a great game,
Yeah.
right? He was literally up there to give them another excuse, one for Jim Nantz to get him to do the, fight for your right to party. And he throws in the Viva Las Vegas and all that kind of stuff. And I mean, it's literally to give him excuse to point the camera at his girlfriend. I was, and then I saw some of the stuff on social media afterwards. It looked like he was about to rip her neck off when they were making out, with their post-game makeout session. It's like, all right. But adding Jason Kelsey to the mix now that he is, a civilian again, that is, I don't know. I've never listened to their podcast. Maybe I need to start listening to their podcasts. I don't know. See how it goes. Whiteboard wagers, Jesse. Do you have any whiteboard wagers? Lock of the day.
Yeah, I came up. I have one lock of the day. I won't be as long as last time, but I'll kind of walk through my thought process and we'll get going here a little bit. So,
okay.
I specifically looked at the Kings versus Suns this evening. Two teams with identical records, two teams who have played each other 3 times. So this is their 4th time this season. And then I just started looking, shopping at some lines, and I really liked Grayson Allen's over 1.5 threes made. And I'll tell you why. I have this cool app that basically shows you these stats I'm looking at right now. So the line right now for Grayson Allen is minus 180. In his last 25 games, he's hit this line 19 of 25 times, implying that the bet should be minus 316. So a bet that's minus 180, and in his last 25, they're saying the odds should be minus 316. That automatically raises my eyebrow in terms of value. Then you start looking at the last 10 games. He's hit it 6 of 10. And in his last 5 games, he's hit it 3 of 5. Okay, so now we're looking at, Grayson Allen by itself, minus 186, $50 would only win you, just about $26. That's not enough really for me. So I start looking at, what can I do to boost this odds a little bit? How can I get this closer to minus 100? And then I started looking at Giannis's points. In his last 25 games, I picked his alt line of 25 points. He's hit that in 21 of 25. In his last 10, he's hit that 7 of 10. In his last 5, he's hit that 3 of 5. So, again, looking at Grayson Allen's threes, this is kind of a type up or a summary of why I liked it. 4th matchup of the season. In his last 25 and his last 10 and 5, these are kind of the odds implying what it would be. But the most important stat to me is they've played each other. In his games against the Kings this season, he's 3 of 6 from 3 on the, back in December. He was 9 of 14 against them just about a month ago. He's hit this line in 6 straight against the Kings, and he shoots 53% from 3 at home. That's a pretty big number. And I think the line that stuck out to me the most is the Kings are the worst team in the league at guarding the 3. They allow opposing teams to shoot just about 40% for, from 3 for opposing teams. So, you pair this with Giannis at 25 points, you get a nice little 2-leg parlay at minus 102. And that's what I did this evening. I really like Grayson Allen's threes just because the Kings play a fast tempo and they're one of the worst teams at guarding the 3 this season. So
your parlay is Grayson Allen over 1.5 3-pointers and Giannis Antetokounmpo to score 25 plus points.
Yep.
All right.
There it is.
And you're very confident in that.
Very confident. $50 worth confident.
All right. Giannis 25 plus and Grayson Allen over 1.5 3-pointers. All right. Good stuff. But Brent is still going. Brent is still going. Brent, you're gonna have to vent by yourself because we're gonna wrap things up right now. I think that we just need to let you two go back and
We
forth.
can have our own show.
Literally butt heads.
Brent Smith, you brought up a really good question here. I'd like to get into the chat. He said, okay, who's winning a Super Bowl first, the 49ers or the Cowboys? It's really funny because the Cowboys have a most recent Super Bowl, but the 49ers have had the torture of so many Super Bowl appearances, NFC Championship appearances. I don't feel bad. Y'all have not won a Super Bowl sooner than the Cowboys have, yet you keep getting second place every year. So I don't know which is worse.
And I don't know how that even became the question. Like Jesse's whole point was looking at things that Spagnuolo's defense does that is similar to concepts that Al Golden has. And Brent turned that into, well, the offensive line stinks and Brock Purdy is better than you think. And the damn game went to overtime. It went down to the wire.
It basically was a tie.
Right. Like, okay.
Someone had to win.
Great. You've made all these points. What does that have to do with who's going to win a Super Bowl first, the 49ers, the Cowboys? Like, Jesse brings up a good point. As of right now, the Cowboys still have the more recent Super Bowl. Even though you've been to 3 Super Bowls, you've lost. Like,
just
if I were going to bet, though, I would bet on the 49ers, even though that has nothing to do with the question or the topic that we were talking about. You're just very hurt by the fact that the 49ers lost. I get that. Like, I am still not completely over the way the Cowboys just got their butts rolled by the Green Bay Packers in a home game. I'm not. So I get the fact that you're hurt by this, Brent, because it's 2 days after the Super Bowl. Your team lost again. Brent. So I gave you my condolences yesterday. Like, you I feel sorry for because you're a fan and you're mad that your team lost, but I'm not sorry that the 49ers lost.
That's the part. If this was anyone but the 49ers, I'd let it be able to just roll off, but it's the 49ers. I appreciate your fandom. You and I are the same person. I blindly defend a lot of Cowboy players.
Brent
Probably
says
a little
he missed
bit
30 minutes, so I guess he's commenting on stuff that we talked about 30 minutes ago. I don't know where. It's like we're in the twilight zone. We're communicating on different time planes right now. Have a great night. Enjoy your Valentine's Day since we won't be here tomorrow, and we will talk to you later in the week, though. Brent, if you really need to, keep venting with your 49ers stuff, I guess we'll be here. But otherwise, have a great one, everybody, and we will talk to you later on IB Nation Sports Talk.